Hello and welcome to Beyond the Point podcast with me, Ali Christensen. I'm curating the content I wish I had had as a dancer and creating strong, healthy, thriving dancers for the future. Not only am I your host and ex-professional dancer, but I own Align Fitness here in Huntington Beach, California, and I'm the creator of online courses for dancers such as lower body flexibility and turnout for dancers. I am so excited for you guys to hear today's podcast. If you're a dancer who's ever had an injury, everyone raise their hand. This podcast is for you. If you're somebody who's ever had an injury and you feel like your mental state has just dropped because of that injury and you feel sad or negative or angry, this podcast is for you. If you are wondering what you're going to do with your dance career and you ever have had the fleeting thought of, well, if I don't pursue dance, have I just wasted all of my time here training for the last 15 years? This podcast is for you. If you are a parent of a dancer, this podcast is for you. This is such a good one. This is a recording of me and my client who has been dealing with a broken back. I have talked about her actually in the episode with Dr. Wilson towards the beginning of the season. And she has agreed, the dancer has agreed to come on and share kind of her experience. And we went through her injury and from me meeting her to now. And it was, I think, enlightening for both of us to put the pieces together. But she also got the opportunity because of this injury to really learn how to be a smart dancer, how to see her life outside of the dance studio. I don't mean without dance, but outside of the dance studio, and make some very, very informed, smart decisions about her body, her mental state, who she works with, and where she wants to go. This is definitely an episode you want to listen to all the way to the end. So I will see you at the end of the podcast. So today in our podcast room, I have one of my clients I've been working with for, I think, almost 2 years or over 2 years. Her name is Gabby Lynch, and I'm so excited to have her here in the room with me. Say hi, Gabby.
Hi.
So Gabby and I have worked very intensely together because she came to me as a referral from Dr. Wilson, who you have heard on the podcast before. If you go back towards the beginning of the season, you'll hear Dr. Wilson there. And we actually refer to Gabby a little bit in that episode. Gabby has been with me, like I said, for, I'm going to say over 2 years now. And her injury was what I hope you never get to. We've talked a lot about that, right, Gabby?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the reason I say that is because Gabby's injury, one, was pretty extensive, but not, we have come back to the beginning almost, but now she has to do a lot of work to keep herself from being in pain. So I'm going to tell you really fast a little bit about her injury because I really think that this moment has changed her from my perspective. She's nodding her head yes here in the studio. And then I'm going to let her dive into things. So for Gabby, what she ended up coming to me from or for was she basically had a stress fracture in her spine. And this is something that can happen to all athletes. It happens actually a little bit to dancers. It's not something that she did. It's just something that can happen over time. And this is basically the result of this is that we kind of say like her spine, the certain segment of her spine is slippery. So it can move forward or back. And a lot of the times when we have a injury in the spine, it moves one direction. And that then gives us a very clear movement preference. And it's really much easier to treat because for a doctor, and it's much easier for me to work with because we have a clear direction. What we found with Gabby's injury took us probably about a year was that her injury moves in both directions, which is not as common and challenging. So that's where we're at with Gabby. And this issue that she had, we knew right away was a stability issue and that stretching was not going to fix it, even though it probably felt like she should stretch it. But we figured out that's not what needs to happen. So I just talked a bunch. Gabby, welcome to the podcast. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself just in normal life.
Okay, so I'm 17 right now, and I'm dancing in a performing arts group with my high school, and I have been dancing since I was 2. I have trained in a bunch of different styles, and I've pretty much just danced my whole life until I got my big injury, which took me out for a while, but I have still managed to keep it in my life, and I'm dancing a lot. Right after this, I'm going to a big rehearsal with the Limon Company. So, yeah, it's been rough, but it's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, it has been a blessing, but it's taken you a bit to get to this point.
Definitely.
Yes. So, when we're like going back about 2 years, you had been in pain before, and you were actually seeing a doctor, a chiropractor for a certain injury, I think for your hip, right? You had some hip stuff.
Yes.
Before you saw that doctor, did you see anyone else? Had you been doing anything for that issue? I don't even remember if that was true.
No.
So,
I first started with Dr. Wilson.
Yeah, so you started Dr. Wilson. So you'd been going in for some hip issues, probably like pinching in the hip, not feeling like you can get your leg above 90 degrees, that kind of stuff. That sounds like what it is.
Lack of mobility.
Yeah, absolutely. And what were you thinking as that issue was happening? Do you remember like what you were thinking as you went into Dr. Wilson and as you were working on that treatment style with her?
Largely, I had been working with a teacher to increase my flexibility in my hip. And with all the different exercises we were doing, she had thought that there was an issue in the shaping of my hip in terms of how I could get the movement, but we found it was a lot of core. I wasn't breathing the right way. I was only breathing with the upper part of my torso instead of my full torso, but I didn't really think much of it to be something serious until that stopped hurting and something else started hurting.
So what started hurting after that?
My back.
Yeah, like low back, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, this is common that I see. We have a hip issue, something that's bothering us in the hip, and the issue actually starts up in the torso and the spine. Most commonly for me, and I'm going to clarify and just say I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to give any type of medical advice. I am talking about from a trainer aspect of this. Although I've worked closely with 2 doctors with Gabby, and it's really been great to kind of co-treat or co-work with each other. We're talking about the training side of this, not the actual diagnosis or the doctor side of this. But what I noticed, or what I see with a lot of dancers that come in with hip pinching and lack of mobility, is that they think that they have to stretch it out. And it turns out a lot of the time that I can get them to figure out their breathing, like you were talking about, make a brace in their torso, and then all of a sudden the pain goes away and their leg moves more freely. So if you've watched any of my videos on Instagram, you'll have seen this is what Gabby and I have worked a lot on, and this is what she was working with Dr. Wilson on, Dr. Gonzalez on. It's when the torso does its job, the hips are able to do their job. The torso is meant to stabilize, and the hips are meant to move like a ball and socket, because that's what they are. So when your torso doesn't hold itself and stabilize itself, then the hips start to grip and feel pinchy, and we're assuming that that's what was happening for Gabby, and that this was actually up in her spine when she was feeling your hip stuff, and it took a little bit for it to get up into your back. So when you saw Dr. Wilson and that all happened and you figured out that it was in your spine, you got some x-rays, I'm assuming, or an MRI.
It actually took us, I think, 6 to 8 months before it really even centered into one spot in my lower back. But after that, we didn't try and push through anymore. She sent me straight to get an x-ray and then an MRI.
Yeah, and where they saw that there was a definite injury, a fracture, and that was a stopping point. No dancing. We got to get you off this. This has to heal. Otherwise, we're looking at more severe injuries in the future. Now, I'm going to make an assumption because I've seen your work progress over the last couple of years. When you were just in for pinchy hips, was your work ethic as hard and good as it is right now?
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah, I know Gabby, so I can say that.
Because it's another thing where I didn't completely comprehend what was going on in my body. When I'm in class and I'm being told one thing, it's conflicting to what I need to focus on more. And then I also just spent more time stretching than I did on the exercise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You hit two good points. One, stretching. Oh my gosh. Okay, guys, I know I have a flexibility course, but if you've done the flexibility course, you know it is not traditional stretching. It is active stretching. It's working with the nervous system. So it is not in the category of what we're seeing as being detrimental to your overall physique. I shouldn't say physique, but health of your body. There was an article not too long ago with the Australian Ballet where they have completely cut out stretching from their routine with their PT and doctor of their ballet. And they measured the results and the injuries went down significantly when they took away stretching from their routines. So that's a very key point, especially for you, because you were eventually just pulling your spine forward and back and making that slippery spine keep moving and causing you pain every time you were stretching. The second thing you brought up was being in class and being told one thing, but then knowing Dr. Wilson or I are asking for what felt like another thing. How did you marry those two together eventually?
Eventually I realized it was just the way things are worded. A lot of the times they want the same thing that you and Dr. Wilson were telling me. It's just phrased as pull up instead of like fill your breathing right and push down into the ground. Mm-hmm. So it's just trying to figure out those differences and also getting out of your own head when it comes to hearing pull up against how we're supposed to be breathing. Mm-hmm. So stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Gabby and I have worked really hard on creating kind of I would say like almost a trigger when you hear pull up, Gabby thinks, breathe into your sides, right? Yeah. She's like, yes, nodding her head. And that's something that I see often as one of the issues of getting your PT or trainer or whatever it is from what you do outside of the studio into the studio is the dance teachers are saying one thing that visually appeals, but it's not exactly what's happening anatomically to create that visual. Is that what you experienced as you got back into the studio? Yeah. So that's a big thing to work on as any dancer going from an injury back into the studio. And I know that that's a big part of what we do. And I will tell you, some of you I know are thinking, well, I don't have somebody who can do that for me. I can do that for you. I want to do that for you because I think this is where the drop in your care happens. There is not that person to move you from PT or from your chiropractor into the dance studio. So just simply being able to say, oh, we want to do A, B, and C when they say whatever it is. That's a big thing. And that's when you started seeing that's when you got back into the studio and were able to stay in the studio. Yeah. Because we had some ups and downs, right?
Yeah. A lot.
A lot. Tell us a little bit about some of those ups and downs from your perspective.
When I first got pulled out, I was pulled out right before I was about to start a big intensive, and it was finishing up my June show. Of course, I pushed through the show because if that was going to be the last time I was dancing, I was going to dance. Mm-hmm. And then I didn't get to do the intensive that I really wanted to go to. And I was out for, I think, 8 months before I got to start coming back in. And I think around the 6-month mark, I started working with you to get me ready to transition back into the studio. And then I started to get to dance again, which was good, but it was also difficult to transition back because that's the first time I'm having to work out all the different triggers on pulling up versus breathing in. And I'm also just feeling behind because all my peers have been dancing for 8 months while I've been doing PT. So I kept going, and I was dancing for a while, and then it started to hurt again, and I got pulled out with Allie and Dr. Wilson, and we took another look. We had to get another x-ray this time.
Yeah.
And that's when we discovered the instability portion of it.
Yeah, that it was moving in 2 directions, not just one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was really hard for me to grasp. I didn't handle any of that very well.
What do you mean by that?
I just got really mad.
Yeah.
Because I was out. I was missing a main stage show for my high school, and it was the last show for the seniors. I had worked really hard on all the rehearsals, and I was mad that it hurt to dance again. Mm-hmm. Dance had always been my escape, and I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone about it because all the dancers that I'm dancing with don't quite comprehend it. And even today, sometimes they're still really worried about my back because they don't understand what I do each day. So I really struggled throughout all of that because I didn't talk to anyone about it except Allie and Dr. Wilson. And there were quite a few times where I was just crying in our sessions.
That's okay. That's what we're here for.
But they did help me get out of that. And I was able to actually go to China this summer for a big intensive.
Which was a huge step.
Yeah.
Huge. So let's backtrack just a little bit. You had been pulled out for the second time. Mm-hmm. And I remember how devastated and low you felt. Like, I could feel it from you coming into the office and to work out. And it was so much of you mentally understanding that this can happen, that I call them flares. Mm-hmm. That the flares can happen, and that from my perspective, and we've talked about this, you were feeling good, and you got laxed on your exercises, yeah, and then you had a flare, and I have shared with Gabby several times that I still have to treat my hip labral tear like it's an active one. If I don't do certain exercises a certain amount of times during the week, I will start to feel my hip. And it took me a long time to figure that out. Lots of downtimes. And my downtimes went from being weeks at a time to a couple days to a day to weeks apart and now years apart. But they still show up. When I hurt my back in October, because I couldn't do my exercises because I had a herniated disc, my hips started to act up. And I was like, no! But I knew what was happening, and I knew I could get out of it, but it was going to take some time to A, be able to do them, and then B, have them come into effect. So you had kind of gotten a little laxed on them, and because you were feeling good, which is a good thing. And then because that happened, we slipped, or we made that drop, and we felt the flares. You actually came in and saw Dr. Gonzalez also. Dr. Wilson and Dr. Gonzalez consult together back and forth. And that's one of the reasons I love working with both of them, is because they know what they know, and they know what they need to ask help on. And that is so huge, dancers and parents looking for a practitioner, because I have experienced, and I hear a lot of times where if it's taking a long time, if it's taking more than a few weeks for you to feel any type of result, that may not be the type of care that you need to be having at this time. And if the doctor can't recognize that, you probably need to find a new doctor. And there are a lot of good doctors out there, but you have to search them out. And just because somebody worked for one person doesn't mean that they're going to work for your injury or your problem. So the two of them had consulted, and they actually sent you to Dr. Gonzalez for a little bit, for a month. And they were like, let's see what he can do. That's where we found that it went both directions. And then Dr. Wilson was able to take over and be like, great, here's what we want to happen. But during that time, you really had to come to terms that this was going to be a lifelong approach. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that this was going to be something that you were going to be dealing with for the rest of your life, and that you either were going to make it work for dance, and you were going to put in the work and have the effort and just know how you have to work to dance, or you could not dance. I think Dr. Gonzalez said if you wanted to be a hockey player, you'd be really good at this. Did he tell you that? Because I think he told me that.
I don't think he ever told me that.
Because we were talking about the injury itself, and he was saying, gosh, this is a difficult injury for a dancer because you're so mobile. You move in every direction. If you were an athlete that only moved in certain ways, you could really build up and kind of buttress the area that's painful for you or has the injury, and you would probably be fine. You'd still have to do your exercises, but like you're in a very difficult sport for the injury that you have, and you do know that. So we were joking, like, well, if she wants to be a hockey player, then this would be great. Time to switch careers. But you figured out that you wanted to work through it, and you had a short time frame because you had been accepted to go to China and do this, and you said, that's what I want to do.
Yes. So I had to, with each flare-up, it definitely took a hit at me, and I started to question what I was going to do because I had always had the plan, I'm going to be a professional dancer, but I couldn't see myself taking such a rigorous course in terms of a professional ballet company after my injury, but I could still see myself dancing, and I knew that I wanted it to be a part of my life, and I had to figure that out with all of you guys before it really clicked that I could be okay with all of it. And I think that's when my mentality really changed in terms of what I was doing with my exercises and how I wanted to help others, because being a dancer, I'm surrounded by dancers who are like me, and we get a pain and we ignore it, and it just spirals from there. So.
Yeah, it does spiral. And again, from my perspective, during that little time where the second time you were off dance, we were getting you ready for China, we kind of changed your treatment plan. The doctors changed your treatment plan. I changed your workout plan with the doctors, and it was weights. It was body work, it was floor work, and it was weights. We took out gyrotonic because we just figured out that we're not stable enough in all of these bendy positions to be using such a fluid motion. And so we took you and said, we're going to take away that. We're going to build up your sides so much, and your hips and your glutes and your lats and everything. And then we're going to assume, because at that point it was like assuming / crossing our fingers, that this was going to work. And it did.
Yep.
Right? And I saw a huge shift in your being, mannerisms, personality as you started to, I think, feel less pain and realize that this was very manageable with the right type of effort and exercises and treatment, and that you could be in the studio and your cross training that looked nothing like dance, both with the doctors and with me, was making you a better dancer.
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, eyebrows high.
Yeah. Because I remember being at Long Beach, and we had long days because it was an intensive. And the China tour had extra rehearsals. And so we'd be rehearsing and dancing all day, and I'd get my exercises in at the few breaks we had. And then I would come straight from Long Beach here or to Dr. Wilson, and I would do those exercises, and I was still doing really well. Yeah. And I was really happy with that.
Yeah, you were. I also want to jump back just a little bit in the timeline, because that was during the summer. That was last summer. So now you're a senior. So last year during your junior year, your schooling was rough.
Yeah.
Your schedule was so intense. I remember talking about this with you. You were going from 7 a.m., sometimes earlier, to 10 p.m. at night because you had extra rehearsals. You're in an arts program at your high school. You were dancing at another studio, intense ballet training studio, trying to get your grades, get into college, all the things that I know all of you who are listening are doing. And it took a big toll on your emotions and your sleep.
Definitely.
And your everything. And I think part of what I saw happen during that second time off, right before China, was your schedule lightened up. You didn't have the mental and emotional commitments of school. And you were able to focus on your body. And you can't do that exactly during the school year. But this school year, it's a little bit different as a senior than it was last year. and we were talking about this not too long ago, that it's a big difference for you mentally being in this spot where you have more, I don't want to say time, because you're still extremely busy.
Yeah.
You're still very busy. But I don't know if it came as the school schedule shifted or if it was your mental state as you realized you could handle this. But something has shifted from last year to this year. And I feel like school has a little bit to do with it.
I agree. I think it was a bunch of me figuring out that, one, I could handle it, and two, what was actually helping me. Mm-hmm. And school being one of the biggest factors, I had to figure out what I wanted to do with my entire life last year in terms of where am I going to go for the next 4 years? What am I going to major in? And I kind of got that really under control over summer after working so much in dance and then with you and Dr. Wilson. Then I also figured out one of the most challenging things for me at school is not being in control of whether or not I can stand or sit in class, because we go from class to class with little movement. And I had to talk to teachers about whether or not it'd be okay if I could stand in the back so that I could do what I needed for my back and be able to concentrate on what I was doing, because I wasn't focused on the fact that my back was pinching and I can't do anything because class doesn't get out for another 45 minutes.
Yeah, and sitting's a big trigger for you.
Yeah.
It's for Gabby specifically, it's a big issue. And I think during your junior year, that was one of the things that we just weren't attacking, is that you were sitting for 7 hours a day.
Yes.
And last year, or for the beginning of this senior year, I think I finally said, you have to stand. What do you need to do to stand? And you said, I think I need a written note. So we got the doctor to write you a written note that said you needed to stand. And most of your teachers were very understanding of it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I showed them the note and they said, whenever you need to stand up, stand up. A lot of them will have one table that is like standing height. And so they'll arrange the seating charts that I'm sitting in the back, so that if I ever need to just stand up and go to that table, I don't have to make a scene in front of the class, because I am also the very shy kid who doesn't want everyone to look at me when I stand up.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So there are ways to make these little changes during your day. And I think sometimes I hear dancers feel very stuck and like there's no control that they have. And that's not true. That's not true at all. We just have to find a compromise, and you have to think outside of the box a little bit. Recognizing your triggers for your pain are a huge thing. Knowing that sitting was aggravating Gabby so much, even though she was doing all this work, and she did so well over the summer where you weren't sitting, that was a big light bulb moment of like, maybe the sitting is just not, it's tipping the scale in the wrong way. So hopefully as you go into college, you're not going to be sitting as much. But in the future, if you end up, if sitting here for this hour while we're doing this podcast, that doesn't bother you, because we're filling your bank account with good movements and you're not sitting as long. So we have lots more to take away from than we did before. So tell us a little bit about China, because that was a huge thing that you made it into. It's a very exciting opportunity. And you worked your butt off to get there. And then we sent you off on however long it takes. I don't even know how long the flight is, with like an arsenal of things to make you feel better. We had oils, we had rubs, we had exercises, we had books, you took bands, you took supplements. Like, we were like, okay, we're not going to see you for 3 weeks. Here's everything we got. Like, you know what to do, but here are all the extras. How was that trip for you with all of your back stuff?
Well, the first day of the intensive itself was actually my first day back dancing at all. Yes. So that was intense, but definitely rewarding. The flight to China was 15 hours, and the biggest thing that we knew there was that I could not sit for all 15 hours. Yes. I needed an aisle seat so that I could just pace up and down the aisle and tell the flight attendant that I need to move. Yep. And I did. I got up and I walked around, and I had all my back stuff in my carry-on so that it would all be with me, because that was also such a big part of what I was packing. The first thing I talked about with you and Dr. Wilson and Dr. Gonzalez was what I need to take.
Yeah.
And I had bands for exercises. I had supplements for inflammation, and I had all my exercises. I had a list written down just so that I wouldn't forget all of them. We even talked about what I could use and substitute for weight, because I can't take weights to China.
Yeah, that's right.
So it was lots of point shoes and bags of clothes that I
carry your friends' suitcases.
Yeah, I did actually. Because we all had to make sure they were under 50 pounds, and sometimes the other dancers, they didn't want to lift it, or they were like, can someone else do this? I'm just not confident in it. And I was usually like, I got it.
Yeah, because you've spent, 2 years now working on your lifting form, and you are a strong dancer now.
I've got my exercises. This is more practice. I can do it.
Good.
So that was one of the biggest things. And all my directors knew about my injury, because there were a couple times where there would be an exercise and I would have to tell them I need to do a different exercise right now. Because we would do things like progressive ballet with big yoga balls, and certain bridging activities were difficult for me, so I had to modify. And so if we were jumping into a rehearsal super quick because timing was tight, they would have us warm ourselves up, and I would do the complete opposite of what everyone else was doing. I was focusing on warming up my core the right way. Everyone was really understanding about it, and all of the dancers were shocked when they found out that I had had such a big injury, and that this was my first experience back since one of my big flare-ups. So...
yeah. Yes. That's so exciting to hear. I love hearing that because as you said, it's nerve-wracking to go back into class after not having danced that 6 or 8 months that you took off. Like that was a different experience than you had the second time. And of course that was a longer period of you not dancing. But if we treat our bodies well and keep them moving in a smart way while you're not dancing, the return back is much less painful. I do completely understand I always say if you take a week off of dance, it's like you taking a month off of dance. And if you take 2 weeks off, it's like 2 months off. And it does, but the training that you do while you're not dancing, you can keep your strength. And you're, of course, like working on your feet, and once in a while we're working on turnout. So there's ways to make this transition back into the studio not as painful mentally and physically. So when you came back from China, you were on cloud 9. You had such a good experience, and you jumped into your senior year with new clarity, I think.
Yes, definitely.
What was that like? What did you experience coming back?
So while I was out in China, I absolutely loved everything that I was doing, and I was on cloud 9. And when I got back, I was still floating, and I had to take a step back and realize, as much as I love dance and as much as it's definitely going to be a big part of my life, I don't think I'm going to pursue it as professionally to the level that I had always thought I would. Because in addition to all of the dancing that I was doing, all of the exercises I was doing, it made me think that I really wanted to be more like Allie and Dr. Wilson and the team that has helped me and help others. It is something that's really hard, and I know I'm not the only person to go through it. I also know I'm not the only stubborn one that definitely doesn't do it all the time.
Yes, that is true.
I figured more out about what I wanted to do, and then it just brought a bunch of clarity in terms of whether or not I was going to stay at an outside studio, or if I was going to focus on performing solely at my high school and focus on all my exercises and keeping my back at the state that it was in, because I was doing really good and I didn't want to go back down again. Yeah.
So what part of in your junior year, part of that schedule was that you were in an intensive arts high school and an outside ballet studio. So add on top your school stress, it was basically like dancing at 2 full-time studios for you.
Yes.
And I remember our discussions as you brought it and said, I'm not sure that I can do both. I'm not sure for my health I can do both. I remember that we were talking about what filled your cup up with dance. If you could only choose one, what gives you the most joy? And that has nothing to do with Studio A or Studio B, but it has everything to do with how you can handle the physical stress too. Mm-hmm. So even though you were feeling really good, the back is a huge consideration. And I think that was one of the things that assisted you to make that decision was, I know if I do all of this, my back can't handle it. Mm-hmm. So what can I handle? And you made that decision, and that's a big part of your schedule release this year. And I think why your back is doing much better. You agree?
I agree.
So as you were saying, you realize you're a stubborn one.
Yeah.
Part of what you've done this year, and you said you realized you'd like to go into school, maybe to be a chiropractor or PT or something along those lines, which I think is fantastic. We need more people in that dance realm who understand that the movements translate and all that jazz. But you decided to do Miss Fountain Valley.
Yes.
Yes. And you had never considered doing a Miss America pageant before this, had you?
No.
No. I remember when you came and said, I think I'm going to do this. I was like, have you ever done that? No. I was like, great, let's do it. Yeah. What guided you into that? And I think that led you into a really great place now where you have things that you're promoting, and it's really feeding into your life passion at this point.
Mm-hmm. My mom grew up in Fountain Valley, so when we moved out here, she found out about the program, and I couldn't compete until I was 18, or graduating and turning 18. Mm-hmm. When she found out that we were going to be scaling back in terms of scheduling at outside dance studios, mm-hmm. she thought it would be a great opportunity as a means to distract me from the first time I wasn't going to be in a Nutcracker, to put me somewhere else, except for the fact that I am terrified of public speaking.
Which you're doing very well at right now.
Thank you. I messed up saying APA at the pageant, but it's okay. We fixed it. I started that pageant, and I figured out what my platform was going to be, because everyone needs a platform. And I wanted mine to be special to me, because even if I didn't win and outside of the pageant, I still wanted to keep my platform going. Mm-hmm. So I discovered Beyond the Injury.
You created Beyond the Injury.
Yes, I created it. And right now it's an Instagram page where I want people to be able to go and see advice and just have someone to talk to, because an injury is a big thing, and I'm there for all athletes, not just dancers, even though I'm going to be best skilled at talking with dancers. Most athletes have their life planned out by 5. Mm-hmm. I did. And then all of a sudden it comes crashing down because you're not practicing that one thing 24/7. And that really takes a lot out of you. And I didn't know who to talk to for it, so I just kind of went quiet and struggled with it myself until I started talking with you and Dr. Wilson about it a lot, which is also when I started crying a lot in rehearsals. But it did really help, and it helped me to figure out where I wanted to go now. And I'm so much happier having more clarity in terms of where I want to go. And I want to be able to help others find that, and also help them see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's really hard to see sometimes, but I've reached it. I'm dancing again, and I'm handling my injury. It's not like the end, like it feels in that moment.
Yeah. I know, because I've lived this too. And, the light at the end of the tunnel for me was not returning to dance. But I have said this on here before, but I'm extremely happy doing what I do, and could arguably, in a slightly different way, say happier than when I was dancing. It's different. And I think that that's there's a separation that needs to happen in the mind, but doesn't mean you're not still a dancer. It doesn't mean you still don't have that artistic side if you decide to pursue something other than a professional career in dance. And I hear all the time, and I think it's so ingrained in athletes and dancers, that if you're not doing that thing, you're of no value. And we don't mean to do that, but we put so much value because we've been doing it since we're 5 that you get congratulations, you look so beautiful, that was great, hard work. The compliments come as you work hard in that one arena. And when you aren't getting that, who are you?
Mm-hmm. We base our identity off of it.
Yeah.
And then we feel like we're no one when it's not there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. You really feel like your identity is taken away from you. But it's not. That's your feeling. That's my feeling inside of me. That is not how the world perceives us. And I think that another common thing for dancers this is kind of put at risk for them, that feeling of, am I still going to be the same person I was? Is that everything you've done up till this moment in dance is not a waste. If you decided today to never dance again, never to walk into a studio, never to put on pointe shoes again, everything you've learned up till now, every blood, sweat, and tears literally in the studio is for a reason and will make you better at what you do next. There is no wasted moment. And I know I spent a couple years not working with dancers, I didn't go see ballet, I didn't step in a studio because it just felt too painful, and I didn't have anyone to talk to either. All of my friends and peers were dancers, and at that point they were all going into their professions. And I was not. And I just ignored it for a few years. And it wasn't until a certain point that I realized all the training, all the strictness, the world experiences, the communication between teacher and student, dancer and dancer, those all have given me the tools to do what I do today. And I'm confident, even if I'd become like an accountant, I still would have all these skills because of dance that are not wasted when and if you decide you're done dancing.
It's not an easy decision by any means, but it's definitely rewarding, and it doesn't have to feel like it's the end, like it always does. Mm-hmm.
It does feel that way, and it's okay to feel that way. Mm-hmm. You have to go through your emotional process, but I would recommend you not spend years like I did feeling like you need to shun dance from our world. And, there's still that artistic side. I think that for me, that's what I had to realize is even though I'm not taking class every day and my right leg doesn't go above 90 degrees anymore, I still have that artistic, creative ability, and part of me that needs to be fed. And some of that is by taking class, and some of it is by finding other outlets to do things. This year, I decided to take up woodwork. It's been challenging, but I like the challenge, and I like, it's like a different part of my artistic side that I'm still figuring out, but it feeds me, feeds me artistically. So you can find that.
Yeah. For me, it was choreographing because while I was injured and couldn't dance, I started taking a choreography class, and that was difficult when I had to set stuff on myself because it meant much more limited movement, mostly in neutral. But when I got to set movement on other people, of course I explained why I couldn't be showing them it, because a lot of dancers learn by watching their choreographers, and I would just explain what to do. And that really helped me because it was a way for me to process my emotions and see what I was doing on others in a different artistic way.
Yeah. And you got to work on the verbal skill, which you said is scary for you.
Yes.
That's, something scary. So again, your injury led to something that you found a way to make a little shift, and you stepped into the choreography realm, and then you figured out, oh crap, I can't show it. How am I going to do this? And you developed a whole new skill of communication that is very important as you go out into life to be able to communicate. Gabby and I have talked a lot because she comes in, well, now it's once a week, but for almost 2 years, it was twice a week. And we would talk a lot about corrections and way that we said things to, well, me to Gabby, Gabby to me, and then the teachers to the students. And something we just know to be true is that just because the correction I give Gabby works doesn't mean that it sparks the same thing in dancer B. And you have to be able to, on the spot, come up with something to like it to or to compare it to. And that's a life skill, being able to communicate effectively to different people, get the same message, but effectively get the point across in, slightly different ways. It's a huge learning lesson.
Definitely.
And it probably prepared you for Miss Mountain Valley a little bit, whether you know it or not.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so great. So, Gabby, we're coming up on our time. So this was great. I want everyone to go check out Gabby's Instagram. It's on the newer side, but she's building it, and I love it. Tell everyone where they can find that.
On Instagram, it's at Beyond the Injury, and it's a public page. It's just still pretty small because it is very new.
Mm-hmm. Yep, but all good things start small. Mm-hmm. And, Gabby is finishing up her senior year. She's getting ready to go into college. She has a game plan and she has a passion. And I think that this platform really is part of it. And so I'm so grateful that being part of Miss Mountain Valley brought this out in you, because it is something that you've lived and you continue to evolve through. And Gabby's someone who really gets it. And she's also developing more of the smarts, I would say. She has her own injury experience of what worked for her. But I've seen your knowledge, Gabby, grow. You come in and ask very smart questions now. And you say, isn't this kind of like what we were doing? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yep, exactly. And she's like, so it's going to make this happen. I'm like, yep, exactly. So the dots have really started connecting for you. And I think that you are a great example of what any dancer can be, whether they go from injury back to dance or injury into something else, or just decide they don't want to dance anymore. You are a great example of that. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to Gabby and I here in the podcast room. It's such a pleasure for me to sit down with Gabby without weights in our hands and talk through this phase in her life. We have discussions like this often, but it was really nice, actually, for both of us to just listen to each other and hear and see where she started and where we are today. And I'm excited to see where she's going to be in a few years, because this is still a journey. She's still dealing with injury, but she has many tools, and mental and physical, to assist her through. I think it's really easy for all of us to fall into a victim mentality with our injuries, and we all have moments, and it's okay to feel upset about something. As you heard Gabby say, she had a lot of moments where she was just upset and angry, and why is this happening? And it's okay to be there, but you can't hang out there. You are going to get nothing done. And I believe that you're going to start seeing the rest of life that way, and that things are going to start happening, quote, to you, instead of you creating your life, creating your reality. And that doesn't mean that things don't happen, but you are in charge of how you deal with the situations and what you make of them. And I do think that as we view life in that way, then we start pulling more of the good into our life. And I think that it kind of radiates out that way. So getting to hear from firsthand from another injured dancer who has made big changes and is still dancing. If you know somebody who is dealing with injury, from small injury to big injury, or is not sure where they're going with dance, please be a friend and pass this episode on to them. If you hit the little 3 buttons on the side, you're going to have a spot to say share. Share this episode with them, and know that you wouldn't have heard this and you wouldn't be here thinking about these things if Gabby hadn't been willing to share. So pass on that that little act of love and share it with your dancer friends or another mom that might have a child who's going through this. It's really, really important for us to keep our mental state in a healthy checkpoint for injuries. And I think there's a lot of little nuggets that Gabby shared of both physical and mental of where she was and is now. You can always leave a review for us on iTunes. I deeply appreciate the reviews. They assist for the podcast to be found more easily. And my goal is to spread this information and love to the dance community. I make no money on this. In fact, I spend money each week to make this podcast happen. And I do it because I love you guys and I want the information to be out there. So leave us a review and it will assist for this information to spread. Thank you so much. I'm very excited for what's happening in the future podcasts, so keep listening, coming out every Wednesday. So I will see you all here next week on Beyond the Point.